What's up, you guys? I'm Chibi Joe, and I'm here with another improv movie review. And this time we're going to be talking about The Intruder. Um, Before I start, this movie is not great. It's not going to win any awards. It was fun, though. I actually enjoyed myself. So, um, it starts off showing San Francisco, doing some really cool drone shots and all that stuff. And it goes by to this guy like zooming through the city. I mean, just going full speed ahead through the city. And he's with his buddy. His buddy's like, dude, what the hell? Why are you trying to kill me? And he's like, yeah, man, your wife's hosting a surprise party. And then he's like, fudge, I just revealed the surprise party for you. And then you find out the surprise party was for because he's the best, he's the biggest seller in this big company. And he says, thank you. And then him and his wife have a conversation about, hey, do you want to buy a house? That house in Napa, I think is what they said. And she's like, yes. And so they finally went up there. They met the owner in a very interesting way. They saw a deer and they're like, oh, look at the cute deer. And then freaking Quaid comes in and just blows the deer away with 2 shots with a rifle. And he's like, hi, I'm Charlie. And like throughout this entire movie, he smiles like freaking Jack Nicholson. They did show a lot of like the Shining imagery. And I'll get into that. There's one other scene that really reminded me of it. But just the way he talks and the way he acted. It reminds me of a lot of like a Jack Nicholson role. So they talk to him. And he keeps bringing up like his dead wife and his kids left. His wife died of cancer. And it's real sad and all that stuff. And they're going through the house. And he's like talking about each room, and he says, I'll sell the house for $3.5 million. And the husband's like, I don't know, man. And so then before they leave, Charlie tells them, I don't remember their names, Anna and then I think Sam, maybe? They're talking, and so freaking Charlie is like, well, how about this? I'll give you the house and the furniture and the tapestry, whole 9 yards, and sell it for 3.3. So they end up buying it. They're moving in. Charlie moves out, hands him the keys. He said, hope you enjoy it here. I'm heading to Florida. Because I'm going to move in with my daughter. And they're like, okay, have a good time in Florida. And so, they're enjoying the house. They have some good married American couple sex time. Never took off all their clothes, just kind of made out and rubbed against each other with their clothes on. So, they kept going. I think they're now like enjoying the home and looking through it, and so they the scene changes. The guy's at work now. The husband's at work, and it's with a client. And so his phone rings. Him and his buddy Mike, I think his name was Mike, were talking to this client and trying to sell her on stuff. And his phone rings, and it's his wife. And so he answers the phone, and he said, "Hey, what's up?" The former homeowner is now mowing the lawn. And he's like, "Well, right now I'm having some trouble moving. Moving's a lot harder than it looked." And he said, "I am right now staying at the Royal Hotel." And he's like, "Okay." Or she's like, Annie, when she confronts him, he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm just standing at the Royal Hotel. It's right there down the road." And she's like, "Okay." And he said, "Oh, I just thought I'd mow the lawn for you, since you hadn't done it yet. You had to work really hard to keep track of it." And he apparently, like, off screen, he gave her a lot of tips and stuff of how to do things. And she's like, "Okay, yeah." And she also invited him to Thanksgiving, to the husband's displeasure, because the husband's like, he needs to go. I don't want him around. You find out, like, he isn't a fan of guns. That, because you could tell, like, whenever Charlie shot the deer, he's like, "I don't like guns." And even brought up a comment when they looked at the house that he has more guns. So you know he has, like, a distaste for guns. And I enjoy that little subtle end to his character. And so, like, he goes on, and Thanksgiving happens. Hello, person. Thanksgiving happens, and Charlie's there with pies, and, like, complimenting her on her cooking and all that stuff. Getting kind of creepy. Getting to the creepy levels. Him and the husband are walking around the house, and they get to talking, and he notices the tapestry have changed. The painting that was on the wall had changed to a different one. And he's like, "Why'd you change it? It was a gift from me." And the guy's like, "Well, it just didn't feel like us. We wanted it to be like our home, and so we chose this one. We think it's a lot better." Annie's really happy with it. And like, the guy, like, the husband's voice starts, like, fading out, and, like, you could just tell, like, the guy's like real growly, and, like, "F these people for changing my tapestry in their house." And so it goes on. They're having Thanksgiving dinner, and Mike and his girlfriend are having a good time. Oh, I missed a scene. So Mike and girlfriend visited there earlier, prior to Thanksgiving, and they were like, "Wow, nice house." And Mike pees on some roses. And the next morning, I'm guessing he stayed home because, drunk. He finds cigarette burns because the guy smokes. So Mike smokes, and so he tossed it into the yard. And he finds cigarette burns. And so Charlie leaves the Thanksgiving party after a confrontation with Mike. Mike goes out to smoke. And basically kind of calls out Charlie for putting a cigarette burn in his car. And Charlie just kind of acts like nothing bothers him. There's a scene like where he like rubs out the ashes of his cigarette in a statue, and Charlie like blows the ashes out of the statue. Another part, they're talking about like house integrity in terms of like, you know, they put all of their heart into building this house and part of their souls in it, and so the place has soul. And Mike is continually disagreeing, almost to asshole levels. And there's this moment when Charlie grabs the empty wine bottle and smashes it on Mike's head, and then you find out it's like an American Psycho level of fantasy where it didn't actually happen. It was just what he wished he could do. It's the only time that happened in that movie, and that really disappointed me because I really liked that. I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. And it was the only time it happened in the movie. It's the only time that it became relevant in the movie. And it really disappointed me. I wish they would have implemented that, like his fantasies of what he wanted to do, more. But they had to keep the PG rating, the PG-13 rating. So that hurt the movie a lot. I feel like if the movie was rated R and they were able to do more with it, it would have been 10 times better. But it is what it is. So Charlie leaves. Mike tells the husband, we're going to call him Sam. I don't know if that was his actual name, but we're going to call him Sam. Yo, I think Charlie's spying on you from the woods. And Sam's like, dude, you're crazy. Like, yeah, the guy's creepy, but he's not like evil or like illegally creepy. And Mike's like, okay, I bet you $500. And so they go out there looking for Charlie. They found just someone driving away from the truck driving away from the house in a truck as fast as possible. You can't really tell if it's Charlie or not. Just you don't want it around. So, Sam installs a security lights, which is a normal reaction, I feel. And Charlie shows up and he's like, stop drilling holes in my house. And Sam's like, whoa, hold up. This isn't your house anymore. This is our house. I'm installing it so I can protect my wife, you know. And he's like, well, if you want to protect her, get a gun. And Sam's like, my brother was shot down in the streets. I know what guns can do. No guns on my property. Which, like, some people are going to complain, like, oh, it was trying to implement, the political agenda. And that might be true, but I felt they did it in a natural way, that this is an actual argument that people have, that my cousin or my brother or my mom, dad, ex-wife, you know, former wife, got shot, got injured or killed by guns, and I have this inherent distaste and or even in some cases fear of guns. Now is it the right way to think? That's up to speculation. But I liked how they did it. It felt very genuine. It felt very real, because that's an actual argument people have. Then Charlie's like, okay. Yeah, he immediately backed off. He's like, oh, okay. And then told the guy to be very careful with the vines. It took 50 years to grow them. And the guy installing was like, yeah, Mr. Peck. And Sam's like, this isn't your house. Like, Mike mumbled under his breath. And so, movie goes on. They come home from like shopping or something, and Charlie's there with a gun. I might be skipping some stuff, but like a lot of this movie is just filler to fill out the time. Like, it wasn't even a 2-hour movie. The movie started technically at 5:20 and it ended at 6:57. So, and that's including the credits. So it's a very short movie. Not saying it's a bad thing. It's super short. So, Charlie was like, hey, some deer got into you. He said like I said, I'm leaving a lot out because a lot of it didn't matter. It takes it's a very slow, like, first 30 minutes to an hour. Like, you only get like 30 minutes of excitement stuff. Like, all that stuff that happened in the trailer is primarily all in the, like, last third of the movie. They did a lot of, like, building up to. I think they did a little bit too much. I think that kind of hurt the movie. But, like, so he was like, I was just hunting along the creek, and he was like, I just wanted to get some fertilizer, help the flowers grow and stuff, help the garden out there grow a little bit. And he had a rifle, and Sam's like, no guns on my property, Charlie, I've told you once. And he's like, everyone's allowed to hunt on the creek, not just me. And Sam's like, I'm not talking to them, I'm talking to you. I'm telling you, no guns on my property, ever. And he's like, okay, sorry. And so, like, they got into like a short argument, and he's like, sorry for causing trouble. And so he leaves. And yeah, like, you still kind of, like, you hear him, like, kind of say stuff under his breath. You can't really, like, hear it. At least I didn't in the movie theater. Maybe, like, on the DVD release, you'd be able to hear it a little bit better. But I couldn't really tell what he was saying. Just, like, this is in your house. I remember him saying that at least once. Because there was another scene where he showed them, like, the Christmas decorations. And he's like, freaking, this isn't your house anymore. This isn't your house. Like, he's, like, really, really pissed that this guy's acting like this. And, yeah, it was mess. Like, there was, like, intense scenes where, like, you know something's gonna happen, and then nothing happens. So Sam, at his workplace, he goes to the bar with his clients after work. And so Annie's putting up the Christmas lights by herself on the house. And Charlie shows up and says, well, he's like, you putting this all up by yourself? And she's like, yeah. And so he's still there. He still kind of waits there. And she's like, do you want to help me, Charlie? And so they got finished. He brought some wine because, like, he felt bad about causing so much trouble. So he brought some wine. And he's like, I tried calling him, but his phone said the mailbox was full. And so, because that was he's like, if you want to stop by, like, Sam never said you can't stop by. What he said was, you know, if you're going to stop by, call or text. Don't just show up. And he said, well, I tried calling. I couldn't get a hold of him. And So they're having wine and stuff in the house, Annie and Charlie, and they're just talking, stuff like that. And she said, it's fine, whatever. And meanwhile, Sam's at the bar, and he sends a text like saying, hey, at the bar with some clients, XO Sam or whatever. And this really upsets her, and so she calls him, and he said, I told you I'm with my clients. It's very loud, and I can't hear it. And she said, you remember what happened last time when you sent a text? And he's like, he's like, basically, she's like, whatever, and hangs up the phone. And, like, throughout this movie, she just kind of, like, the wife, Annie, I'm, like, I understand where she's coming from, but she was just a bitch, like, even, like, unnecessarily so. Like, when he's like, there's something a little bit wrong with Charlie. It's very obvious. Charlie's a very creepy individual, a very intrusive individual. He doesn't want to give up the house, but he did. And so, like, he keeps showing up unannounced as if he owns the place. And, like, she's just like, well, you're just overreacting and stuff like that. It's like, no! This guy literally shows up on my property with a gun after I've requested him not to, and just hangs around, and you let him. Like, sorry, no, that would upset me too. Not because, like, my wife is hanging out with this creepy guy. I mean, that would worry me, but not, like, it would more worry me about her safety because this guy seems unstable. But, like, I would trust her. But, like, it would be more of, this guy is pretending this house is still his, and it's not. And so, the client shows up, and she's like, problems at home. He doesn't say anything, and she says, well, you have the look. Like, you have the look of someone who's having relationship troubles. And she likes, he's like, I gotta go. And she starts, like, kind of flirting a little bit, like, no, you should stay, and goes to kiss him, and he stops her. Like, immediately stops her. He's like, no, hold up. He's like, I need to get my ass home to my wife. And I thought that was a very nice little scene, and it led into, because Charlie left, and he shows up, and so Sam's like, you've been having wine with Charlie, and, like, he's not, he just asks her a question, and, like, yeah, there's some, like, aggressive undertones, because, he doesn't want Charlie there in his home. He doesn't feel safe with Charlie there. Or he doesn't feel comfortable. I mean, not, like, he doesn't feel unsafe, but he feels very uncomfortable with Charlie there. And she's like, don't change the subject. We're talking about you sending a text. Because I guess the last time he sent a text to her, he was with somebody. He was with somebody else while they were dating. And he's like, we went through therapy. He said, we got married. He said, this is a home. We're wanting to start a family. And then he just asks her, do you trust me? And she's like, I don't want to talk about this shit. Go sleep in another room. Which, and maybe I'm talking about from a guy, because whenever, when I'm dating, and, like, if I was dating and my girlfriend said, do you trust me? I would be honest with her. I would. And I'd even tell her if it was a situation where it wasn't necessarily trust, but just fear, that I'm afraid something will happen. Not that something did happen, but just something that is in the realm of possibility because it's happened before. And that fear still lingers. Because I'm more of one to sit down and discuss things. I'm going to talk things through. I want to fix things right then and there. If there was an argument or something like that, or even like maybe the next day, talk about it. It's like, let's talk this through. If we're going to be dating, we need to communicate. And so it really irritated me that she's just like, whatever, I don't want to talk about this shit. Like, whenever he just asks her, do you trust me? A very direct and reasonable question in the situation. And again, she's dumb because he has said, I don't want this guy here. And it's not a jealousy thing. It's, I don't feel comfortable with this guy here. And, like, I think in this scene he mentioned, like, Charlie's got a thing for you. No, that was a little bit later. Because it is, like, very obvious, very touchy-feely, from Mr. Charlie. And so, he goes on Sam wakes up in the middle of the night because he hears a sound, and he's like, I thought I heard Charlie. Sorry I woke you up, because his wife woke up and basically said, what the fuck are you doing? And he's like, sorry, I didn't mean to wake you up. And so stuff happens, and they end up having non-sex with Charlie, like, a little ways into the darkness. And so she's like, well, I don't know how Charlie's getting in because it would turn on the lights. And he's like, I don't know either. So he just kind of ignores it. And then, like, Charlie shows up a couple more times, and Sam basically says, I'm done with it. I'm going to tell him I don't want him here. And so they end up going on a dinner date to an Italian restaurant. They drink some wine. He's pretty wasted. Not like slurring wasted, but just like brave kind of wasted. And he's like, listen, I want you to stay away from my wife. He's like, I know that you want my wife, that your wife died 2 years ago, and I want you to stay away from my wife, that you can't have her. And Charlie gets angry and all that stuff, and he's like, And so the next morning, Sam goes on a run, and a truck hits him and knocks him down a ditch. He gets a concussion, so his vision's blurred, and you see this kind of figure standing above him and then leaving, and it looks a lot like Charlie. And so, and he goes to the hospital. He has to stay overnight. She's with him for a while, and he says, hey, go on home. I'll be, and just pick me up in the morning when I call. So, Charlie shows up with a pizza, and he says, hey, I heard that Sam got hurt. Can I brought a pizza for you to make, just to help you feel better. And she's like, this pizza's really big. How about you eat it with me? He says, well, of course. And so, meanwhile, Sam calls Mike and says, hey, call so-and-so. I want you to look up the name Charlie Peck and see what you get, see what you find. Guy's like, yeah, we'll find something. Well, then you find out that he was bankrupt, had tax fraud, like a whole bunch of stuff. And he had to sell the house because there was just so much money he was in debt with so many different people, and he had to sell the house at that price. He had to sell the house. So he goes on and he tells Mike, hey, I want you to basically check on everyone. Check on Annie. Because he's like, this guy is a criminal, and I don't know how I feel about like him being around my house now. So Mike does. Charlie sees him, and Charlie chases him down with an axe and starts talking to him. He's like, "Hey, you want to have a cigarette?" And Mike's like, "No, I'm good. I just want to head home." And Charlie's like, "I think you should have a cigarette. Give me one too." And so Mike does, and ends up getting literally axed in the sternum and killed by Charlie. He's like, "Okay, well, where am I gonna put you?" So then he comes back in, pretends he has a twisted ankle, and like smells her hair like very creepily. And while she's trying to like, see where his twisted ankle hurts. And then like the next morning, he's in the house and she's in the shower, and he's like spying on her in the shower, and he takes off his shirt like he's about to get in the shower with her. Then her phone rings and he hurries up and backs away. And it was Sam calling her to pick him up. And he ends up just kind of shrugging it off and calling like an Uber or some kind of taxi service to his house, and then basically tells Annie, "Hey, Charlie is a very dangerous guy. You need to be careful around him. I don't trust him. You need to be careful." And like he's like, "How did he know I was in the hospital? Like, think about that." And she's like, "Oh shit, you're right. That makes perfect sense that he's spying on us." And so he tries calling Mike again, and it ends up not working because Mike's gone, and dead. They don't know that yet, though. And so he goes to this other guy, the computer guy that looked up a bunch of stuff about Charlie. And he tries to get a restraining order. He like the last part of the scene before he sees the computer guy, the record guy, he calls and tries to get a restraining order. And so he talks to the guy. He's like, "Hey, have you heard anything about his daughters or his kids?" And he's like, "I found a Vanessa Smith." And he's like, "I told you her name was Cassidy." And he's like, "Well," he's like, "I know, she changed her name." And so he calls her, and after multiple calls, he's like, "I think, your dad's very much alive. What? Can you please tell me when he's coming to you? Because he said he's moving to you." And she said, "If he shows up at my door, I'm killing him." She said, "I don't live in Florida. I live in Maine." And then you're like, "Oh shit, this guy's just freaking nuts." And he like at this point, Charlie's in the house, and he's like trying to have his way with Annie. Of everything I do is for you. Remember that. And she's like, "Yeah, okay. I'm sure everything will be fine." And he's like, "Okay." She's like, "Here, how about we talk more about this later?" And so he leaves, and she's like, "Jesus Christ, I am freaking out." And She walks through and she sees her, like, there's like a panel on the wall that's open, and she falls down this hole. She falls down this hole, and she's like seeing a bed and a stove, and his clothes are hanging up, and it's like you find out he's been living under the house, and she keeps walking through, and she finds another ladder, and it goes up to the shed. Well, she like looks through, and you see Charlie like running his fingers through his hair, like trying to straighten his hair like you would before you go on a date or something. Before, at least that's what guys do. That's what I did before I would go on a date. I'd run my fingers through my hair just to make sure it's the way I want it. And Charlie was like, he looks over and he just says no, and because Annie found where he's been staying at, and he chases her and all that stuff. He ends up like knocking her out by like smashing her head against the wall. You also see like where he put Mike's body is like in this freezer around his place, around his underground lair. And that's when stuff starts getting really intense. And so he keeps going. Sam gets a call from the restraining order place, and they're like, so is there an alternate address we can send the restraining order to? And he's like, what do you mean? She's like, well, he's never stayed at the Royal Hotel. And so then he's like trying to get home and stuff like that. And it goes back to Charlie, and he's pretty much about to rape Annie. That's when Sam comes home, and like he like bounds and gags Annie. Him and Sam have a pretty big fight. Sam gets thrown over the railings of the stairs onto a table and then onto the ground. Then he's like, I took care of Sam, now we can be together. And he gets mad because the door's not opening. And that's when like the next shining moment happens, where like he like basically knifes through the door, opens up that panel, and says, Annie! And like it was like the full on like face in the panel of the door and everything, like very much like the Jack Nicholson scene in The Shining. And I kind of liked it. And then like Sam wakes back up and starts fighting Charlie again. And then Annie stabs him in the back. Charlie goes back to the underground lair, grabs a gun and a bunch of ammo. They're hiding now, and Charlie's like gunning down everything, trying to find them. Eventually, Charlie gets into the room with them. Sam grabs a bat, nails him across the face. Sam now has the shotgun aimed right at Charlie, and Charlie's like, you're not going to shoot me because you're a pussy. And really trying to get on the edge of that PG-13 rating. And Annie calls the police, and she says, my husband just shot an intruder. And the final lines of the movie was, go to hell, or something like that. Something super cheesy and stupid. Like, it ruined the whole mood of the movie. And it wasn't bad. Like overall, the movie wasn't bad. It was just super cheesy, slow. Like, this movie could have easily have been an hour-long movie if they would just cut out a lot of the useless BS to the storytelling. But yeah, I'd recommend seeing this movie once. Maybe even like I'd probably say like wait until it goes to your local library and then just get it from the library and send it back when you finished. Like, It's not going to win any awards. It's not like the greatest thing that ever happened in cinema by a long shot. But it's a fun movie. It's a fun watch, a fun little thriller. Just really, really slow. But that's all I gotta say. So, if you like this video, comment, like, and subscribe. And guys, I'll see you next time. Have an awesome day and a good night.